Imagine you're sitting by a campfire, the desert wind howling through the mesquite, and I'm about to spin you a tale older than the dust. Before I begin, if you love stories of stoic gunslingers, broken souls, and the rare sparks of hope in a harsh world, then hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below about your favorite Wild West legend. Now, lean in close, because this one begins in silence, so deep it could swallow a man whole. The plain stretched endless under a copper sky, dry earth cracking like the skin of an old wound. Crows circled high above a lonely shack, its boards withered gray, leaning against the horizon as though it barely had the strength to stand. A single horse stood tethered in the corral, its flanks scarred from old rides, and inside the shack lived the man no one dared to approach. The gunslinger. He was a figure etched in hard lines, jaw like stone, eyes the pale gray of a brewing storm. His hands rested easy on the revolver at his hip, yet the air around him was taut, as though the land itself feared a sudden crack of thunder. He had walked away from towns, away from lawmen and outlaws alike, until nothing remained but this barn, this shack, and the legend that followed him like a ghost. They said he never spoke more than a word when pressed, and never smiled. On one particular evening, as twilight pressed its violet fingers across the horizon, he heard a sound that did not belong. Not the creak of the rafters nor the restless shifting of his horse. This was softer, unsteady, like the whimper of a wounded animal. Lantern in hand, revolver drawn, he stepped into the barn, boots crunching against straw. There, in the far corner among the shadows, huddled a girl. Her dress was torn at the hem, her face streaked with dust and dried tears. She clutched her knees tight against her chest, flinching at his approach. For a long moment, he said nothing. The lantern cast his features into a mask of iron, and she trembled as though he were a hangman come for her. "Please," she rasped, voice rough with exhaustion. Don't send me back." He studied her in silence. Her ankle was swollen, badly twisted. The way she hugged herself told of days without safety, nights without sleep. She did not look like an outlaw, nor a beggar daring to steal. She looked like someone running from hell itself. Still, he did not lower the revolver. The world had taught him suspicion, carved it into his bones. Yet as the lantern's glow revealed the raw desperation in her eyes, something shifted in him. Not pity, not quite. But recognition. "Food," he muttered finally, his voice low as gravel. He set the lantern on a beam and turned away. She blinked, startled by the word, then by the loaf of bread he placed on the edge of the stall. For a moment, she stared at it as though it might vanish, before tearing into it with trembling hands. He watched without expression, arms crossed. The silence pressed thick between them. She chewed quickly, words spilling in a nervous stream as though to fill the void. I didn't mean to trespass. I was just looking for a place to rest. Just for one night. I'll be gone by morning, I swear." He gave no reply. She shifted, uncomfortable beneath his stare. Her gaze darted to his broad hat, the way it shadowed his face, the scars etched into his knuckles. Something in her, fragile yet defiant, rose against the tension. "You look like a scarecrow," she blurted, then bit her lip as though she'd spoken treason. He didn't move. "I mean," she stammered, all stiff and silent, like someone stuck a stick up your back and left you to glare at crows. Her words tumbled out clumsily, and she flushed, ashamed of her attempt at levity. For the first time in years, the gunslinger felt the edge of his own mask tilt. His mouth twitched, just barely. He strangled the urge before it surfaced, but the sensation lingered, alien and dangerous. The girl, perhaps sensing her failure, gave a shaky laugh anyway. It bubbled up through her fear, weak and broken, but real. She laughed at herself, at the absurdity of it, even as tears streaked down her cheeks. A sound fragile as glass, yet in the stillness of that barn, it rang louder than any bullet. The gunslinger froze. That laughter, it did not belong in his world of silence and death. It slipped past the walls he had built, struck something buried so deep he thought it had long since died. The girl sniffled, wiping at her face, embarrassed. "Sorry. Sometimes it's laugh or break, and I've done enough breaking already." He looked at her then, not as an intruder, not as a threat, but as a soul worn raw by the same merciless land that had shaped him. Her laughter, though cracked and tear-stained, was more dangerous to his armor than any bullet ever fired. He turned without a word, placing a blanket near her feet before leaving the barn. Outside, the wind had stilled, as though the night itself was listening. Behind him, the girl pulled the blanket tight and let out one more soft laugh, quieter this time, but no less piercing. Inside his shack, the gunslinger sat in his chair, revolver resting on the table, lantern dimmed low. His face remained carved in stone, but his thoughts refused to settle. That sound, the laugh of a broken girl, clung to him, unsettling as a memory half forgotten. For the first time in a long while, he wondered what it would feel like to let go of silence. And somewhere in the barn, her laughter lingered like a ghost, daring him to remember he was still human. Morning broke over the valley in a thin spill of gold, painting the barn in long shadows. The girl stirred on her blanket, eyes heavy but clearer than the night before. She stretched, winced at her ankle, and then caught sight of him standing in the doorway. The gunslinger leaned against the frame, arms crossed, the brim of his hat shading his face. "You'll need water," he said simply, and handed her a tin cup. She accepted it, cautious at first, then drank greedily, as though afraid he might snatch it back. "Thank you," she whispered. The words sounded awkward in the silence between them, as though gratitude were a language foreign to this place. Her eyes lingered on him, searching for some crack in his granite exterior. "You don't ask much, do you?" she ventured. When he didn't answer, she sighed. "I suppose I owe you the truth, anyway. My name's Clara." He gave no reply, but she pressed on, her voice trembling like a loose thread tugged too far. She told him of the men who had ridden into her town, outlaws with dust in their eyes and cruelty in their hearts. They demanded her father's land, and when he refused, they made an example of him. Clara's words caught in her throat, but she forced them out. She spoke of the fire, the gunshots, the silence after. Of how she ran, stumbling into the night with nothing but her ragged dress and the memory of her family falling behind her. By the end, tears streamed unchecked down her face, though her voice steadied with something harder. "I thought I could keep running forever," she whispered. "But the West has long arms. They'll come for me. Maybe they're already on their way." He steadied her, unmoved on the surface, but her confession stirred a quiet storm within him. He remembered flashes of his own youth, a cabin, laughter by a fire, faces that belonged to another life. All gone, erased by the same kind of men who now hunted her. He had buried that grief beneath silence, hardened himself into something unbreakable, or so he thought. Yet here she was, pulling threads loose without even meaning to. A sound carried across the plains, hooves, distant but steady. The gunslinger's head tilted, eyes narrowing. Clara froze, breath catching. She knew that sound as surely as she knew her own heartbeat. "They found me," she said, voice breaking. He turned to her, calm and sharp as a drawn blade. "Hide." She blinked, stunned by the certainty in his tone. "You'll fight them?" His revolver rested easy at his side. He gave no answer, but none was needed. Clara scrambled back into the shadows of the barn, heart pounding. Through a crack in the wood, she saw them arrive, 5 riders, dust trailing behind like banners of war. They reined in before the shack, sneering, their leader calling out with a voice steeped in arrogance. "Morning, stranger. We're looking for a girl. Ragged thing, dark hair, limps when she walks. Seen her pass this way?" The gunslinger stepped off his porch, silent as stone. His boots crunched against the dry earth, his hand hovering near his holster. The riders shifted, sensing something colder than refusal in his stillness. "Don't make this hard," the leader growled. "Hand her over, and we'll leave you breathing." The gunslinger's voice, when it came, was low but sharp enough to cut. "Ride on." The outlaws exchanged uneasy glances, but pride is a dangerous fire. The leader spat in the dust. "You got no say here, old man. We'll tear down your shack and your barn if we have to." The air went taut. Even the crows circling overhead seemed to hold their wings still. In that frozen heartbeat, Clara gripped the wood so tight it bit into her palms. Then steel flashed. The gunslinger moved with a speed that defied his stillness. His revolver cleared leather, thunder cracked, and the first rider tumbled from his saddle before his hand even touched his gun. Chaos erupted, horses reared, men shouted, gunfire split the air. The barn rattled with every shot, Clara choking back screams as dust and smoke clouded her vision. But through it all, the gunslinger stood like a storm-given flesh. Each shot was precise, each step unyielding. He cut through them with a cold finality, the kind only years of blood could forge. One outlaw charged him, swinging wild, but the gunslinger's bullet struck true, dropping him in the dirt. Another tried to flee, but his horse stumbled under the sudden crack of lead. Within minutes, the valley fell silent again, broken bodies strewn like discarded shadows. Clara stumbled from the barn, her legs weak beneath her. The sight hit her like a blow, 5 men reduced to silence, and the gunslinger standing amidst it all, smoke curling from his revolver, chest rising steady though a crimson stain marked his shoulder. Her heart twisted between fear and awe. He turned to her, face as unreadable as ever, yet there was no cruelty in his gaze. Only a weary acceptance, as though death were an old companion he had invited to supper once more. She laughed then, wild, broken, a laugh tangled with sobs. Relief, horror, and something fierce spilled out of her all at once. The sound carried across the valley, a defiance against the blood soaking the earth. The gunslinger blinked, startled by the sound. His lip twitched, and for the first time in years, the mask cracked. Slowly, like the sun breaking through storm clouds, a smile touched his face, small, withered, but real. Clara's laughter faltered into silence, her breath catching as she stared at him. "You smiled," she whispered, as though speaking it too loud might break the moment. The wind picked up, tugging at his coat, carrying the last echoes of gunfire into the distance. He holstered his revolver, the faintest ghost of that smile still lingering. For the first time in longer than either of them could name, the silence between them wasn't empty. It was alive. And in that silence, amidst the dust and ruin, something new was born, a bond neither bullets nor blood could undo.